Welcome to stormTRacker, your eye on the storm of your Carolina Hurricanes, and your home for the best insight and analysis to keep you totally informed on what's happening with the Canes. Whether it's the latest news on the ice or off the ice, we've got you covered. Now let's begin. Here's your host, Tom Ray.
With the NHL draft just a week away, Carolina Hurricanes fans are wondering, who are the Canes going to select in the first round? A lot of names are being bandied around. Teddy Stiga, Nikita Artamonov, Charlie Elick, Emile Hemming, and a lot more. There's a lot of different options for the Hurricanes, and I had the opportunity to spend some time with Nick Bass, who is deep into the Canes prospects for both Canes prospects and Dobber prospects, and Nick and I took a look at several of those players. I'm pleased to be joined today by Nick Bass. Nick, of course, one of the real knowledgeable guys on the Hurricanes, and he writes for both Canes prospects and Dobber prospects. Hey Nick, welcome.
Hi, good to be here. You got everything pretty much down pat. I look at a lot of Canes prospects. I look at a lot of prospects in general. I know a lot, probably a lot more than I should, but it gives me a good knowledge base to talk about all that stuff, so good to have. Well,
for sure, and I've certainly read a lot of your stuff, and it seems like you're right on top of it, and really appreciate it for sure. You know, lots of announcements with the Hurricanes recently. Of course, we had the announcement that Eric Tulsky is now the GM, so that's big news, and of course, he's been driving scouting for a long time, so he'll have a major influence on the upcoming draft for sure. But I wanted to talk to you about the announcement yesterday, the news that Cam Abbott's going to be the coach, the head coach of the Chicago Wolves. This is big news. Obviously, the Canes did not have a team in the American Hockey League last year, so now they have a place to put some of these young players that are coming along in their system, and Abbott looks like a good one. What do you think about this announcement?
Yeah, just one thing on the Tulsky front. It's a very collaborative front office, as everybody really does like to know. But I've been told multiple times, and Darren Yorke is kind of the guy that does a lot of their pro scouting in relations to that. He's kind of running it, and their unbelievable scouting group. They do an incredible job. Tulsky does play a part in it. It's just Yorke does the majority of it. Cam Abbott, I really do like the hire. I'm not going to say I was completely familiar with him before the hire, just because even though I do watch a lot of Swedish hockey and European hockey in the first place, I kind of just didn't pay attention to Rögle. Even though they had a former Cane on there, they had Dominic Bach for a while, and they had, I think Jesper Sellgren was there, or that was Luke.
Yes,
I cannot remember.
Yes. Interesting you mentioned that. If you look at some of the players in Sweden that are current Canes prospects, of course, Felix Ungersorm is a guy that we're all excited about. He's going to be certainly someone that Abbott's probably seen. How about Joel Nystrom and Simon Forsmark, a couple of other guys that are over there in Sweden.
Yeah, he's seen a lot, especially on Rögle themselves, for being a very solid team since 2017-18, whenever he took over, sometime around then. They have been an incredibly solid team. They've gotten a ton of young players that he's been able to coach. The big one for me was Mo Seider, turning him into a first-round pick and now first-pairing defenseman for Detroit. Nils Höglander, Simon Ryfors for Tampa Bay, Tom Willander, William Wallander. He's done a ton of good things with development in terms of getting them to where they're supposed to be and getting them to be high NHL picks and getting them to play in the NHL. So I really do like the hire. I think he's got a lot of youth talent coming into Chicago this year that he's going to be able to work with. And I'm really interested to see how he deals with that.
Well, a couple of comments. Jesper Sellgren, I had a chance to watch him when he was in North America. Briefly, and actually won a Calder Cup. And I was really impressed. I was kind of hoping at some point the Canes would sign him up and bring him over, but looks like he's probably past that now. So I'm not sure we'll see Jesper Sellgren. But for sure, I think this is going to be good news for the Hurricanes, and lots of good prospects coming, as we know. And it's great to have a guy with his background coming in to take it over. So that's exciting. I'm pleased about that.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see how he does, because he's going to have they signed a ton of the guys from just a ton of them to contracts this year. So he's going to have a lot of young guys, 21 and under, to work with. So
he sure is. One other thing about, just before we close on this one, you mentioned Nils Höglander. Now, Höglander has been rumored to be part of any deal that Vancouver would do with the Hurricanes. There's been a lot of discussion about a possible deal for Martin Necas. It would probably include Höglander. What's your thoughts on Höglander?
I like Höglander as a player. I'm one of those people that advocated for him on social media, even though I don't use my personal social media for it. I don't really use the Canes Prospects one. I really do like the player. I think he has a lot of talent that hasn't been tapped yet, and you kind of saw that a little bit in the playoffs whenever he was moved onto the line with Pettersson. I don't know if you can make him the centerpiece of a deal in any Necas trade. I think, again, he's an incredible player, but with a Necas trade, you have to be able to do star power or it's not going to work out. Even though, me personally, obviously, I want to see them get prospects. I want to see them get high-end futures. You got to go get a somewhat close to a star for that. And especially after them signing Hronek, who is the big guy they talked about, Vancouver's probably off the list.
And I think you're probably right, but he certainly was somebody whose name came up frequently in some of those trade rumors. You know, the other thing I thought we would touch on would be the kind of the Russia connection. You know, the Canes in recent years have gone a little bit against the grain. They've decided to draft a lot of Russian players. Several other teams, because of the kind of world situation, decided not to do that. And to the Canes' credit, they've been able to draft some excellent young players way down from where they were actually rated. I mean, I think about, you know, Gleb Trikazov and Vladimir Grudinin and Timur Mukhanov and some of the other guys, Alexander Prevalov. There's lots of them. There's just a whole bunch. And I know you've written on several of them, and I'm quite impressed with a bunch of them. In fact, Trikazov's coming over this year. That's kind of an interesting direction. Do you think the Canes will continue with that?
I really do. Ever since getting their current Russian scout, Oleg Smirnov, an incredibly good guy, an incredibly nice guy. I've had a few conversations with him. He helps me a lot with Russian because I took Russian in high school, but let me tell you, it does not translate that well to where I am right now, even though I watch it all the time. He's an incredibly nice guy, and he's an incredibly good scout. He knows a lot about what he's talking about, and a lot of the times with these Russian players, it is part of the whole world situation and not knowing if they are ever going to come to North America. But in the Hurricanes' case, they really like to take that upside more than kind of look at everything else. And guys like Vlad, Grudinin, Gleb, especially Gleb, and Ruslan Kaziev, who big goalie prospect who's going to play in Chicago next year.
Yes.
They just realize the upside is too much there to try and worry about if they're ever going to come to North America. Yeah. And while there was some actual downside and concern with some of these players, and you're seeing that kind of with a few of them, you just have to hope for upside. And they've been continuing to do that. And so far, at least with a few of them, it looks to be working because now they got them in North America and they're going to play for Chicago. So,
yeah, no, I think you're right. And of course, whenever you talk about Russian players, you have to think about Alexander Nikishin. Lots of discussion. In fact, I've seen in the interviews with Eric Tulsky lately, just about every interview has the question, what's going on with Nikishin? Of course, this was started when Don Waddell was talking about the possibility of actually bringing Nikishin over this summer. I mean, nobody's really thought much about that, but he brought it up, and it's opened up a whole can of worms. But Nikishin, obviously one of the best players outside the NHL in the world. What are your thoughts about the Nikishin situation?
So whoever mentioned him in that interview with Eric Tulsky Wednesday, oh man, I give you credit, but that was just, it's one of those things where I don't think a lot of people understand KHL contracts, and it's really not me trying to sound arrogant. It's just an unfortunate situation of Russia is incredibly hard to get news from, and especially with the KHL website and contract news, you got to go to some places that I'm not proud of where I've gone to try and get this information. But I do have a lot of people that try and help me out that do know the Russian system a lot more. But with Russia, it is so incredibly hard for a player that is still under contract for one more year. It is so incredibly hard to try and get them to North America. You're kind of seeing that with Michkov right now, and Danny Briere's comments yesterday, I want to say, was like, hey, he's probably not, we're planning on him not coming over this year. I can't really say much more about it. So realistically, while the sentiment was really cool and it was very nice to hear them even talk about the possibility of it, and the former general manager was the first one to say anything about it, while it was a great idea, it is just not happening. And I understand people want to see Dmitry Orlov whenever he goes over there to play in the KHL, NHL, whatever they're doing over there. They want to see him try and supplement.
Yes, he's going to be playing in the media, and Nikishin's playing in that league as well, apparently.
Yeah, people want to see Orlov stuff Nikishin in a carry-on bag and bring him back. But unfortunately, you just got to wait until SKA runs out of that playoff next year, whether they win it, whether they don't. I think they have a great chance to win it. Just because the strength of their team and they keep adding good pieces.
Yes.
But end of their playoff run next year, I would say like maybe a few weeks after that, you'll have Nikishin signed and he'll be in North America as soon as he physically can. It's just one of those things where you just have to wait. And I know people don't want to wait because he's just that good, but it's unfortunate. Gotta live with it.
Yeah, and of course, SKA is probably the most affluent team in the league, and they're funded through a Russia utility that's associated with the government, so they don't have a problem financially. And of course, he's been one of their top players, and I felt the same way you did. I wasn't sure how he would possibly come out. So yeah, if we see him in March or April, I think that would be incredible, and hopefully they can get something done so that's in place and ready to go. So that's good news and exciting news in any case if we see Nikishin here in North America. I wanted to take a look at now some of the prospects that we think might be in the radar of the Hurricanes, who they might be thinking about. They're going to be drafting 27th overall in the first round. This is going to be an interesting opportunity. You and I have talked about this a little bit. Once you get past 10 or 15, it's kind of an open field.
After about 10, it's going to get really random. And complete honesty, probably we're about Ottawa picks at 7, because they, in recent year, have made some incredibly, I wouldn't say off the board, but they have made some incredibly interesting reaches and some players that you would not think would go where they go. So I think after that Ottawa pick, whatever they decide, it's probably going to get a little interesting.
Okay. So there'll be, there's a lot of different players out there that could be available at 27. So let's touch upon some specific positions, I think, to kind of kick this off. When I look at the Hurricanes, my thinking is that certainly center ice and defense might be on the list. What do you think might be the priorities?
Center. It's 100% center. As of right now, your center that is closest to playing in the NHL is Ryan Suzuki. And the center that probably has the most, I would guess, potential is either one of Justin Robitaille, who had an incredible first rookie professional season with Norfolk before he got hurt.
Norfolk and ECHL.
Or Lucas Mercuri, who is not a bad player by any means. His ceiling just might unfortunately cap him out, but he's really fun to watch, so that's always a positive.
Yeah, I as we discussed previously, Mercuri, I think, is a great guy. I'm not so sure about Robitaille. He's quite small. He is a fast skater, of course. He's a buzzsaw out there, but he's not a big player. And, Suzuki, to me, he's had so many injury problems. He's a guy that I always felt had the skill, so I have to agree with you. I think center ice is a real concern. And when I took a look at centers, a couple of guys that jumped out at me, and I thought we could talk a little bit about them. One of them is Cole Beaudoin. Cole Beaudoin currently playing with Barrie in the OHL. Of course, that's a great program. Dale Hawerchuk, the late Dale Hawerchuk, of course, coached there for a long time. And Andrei Svechnikov came out of Barrie. Beaudoin, I think he's a big guy. He's 6'2", he's 200 pounds. He's one of those guys that's a hard worker. Some of the guys that kind of saw him up in the round of where the Canes would be, Chris Peters at Flow Hockey had him at 27. Dauber had him at 30. Corey Pronman of the Athletic had him at 20. What do you think about Beaudoin?
I do like him as a center. He's an incredible tenacity on the forecheck. He loves to play on the boards. He knows how to use his body, which is always a very good thing for somebody that's just 18 years old. His skating is pretty solid. I think his offensive upside has some real potential there. I don't know if I'm the biggest fan that he's a left-handed guy. I think right-handed center is probably like the biggest thing, even though those are incredibly hard to come by in today's current prospect climate and just in general. Right-handed centers just don't grow on trees. Kind of the same fact that right-handed defensemen don't grow on trees.
Yeah, no question.
Offensively, I think he's got something. I want to see if he can keep continuing that defensive development. I think if he continues to become a complete 200-foot player, he'll probably be very, very good and make the NHL. I will say, though, on any CHL guys, I don't know if the Canes like to take him high. Like I said, like you mentioned with Svechnikov and Suzuki, they just haven't taken a guy from the CHL that high in a while. Not that it can't happen at all. I'm not saying that, but I would just kind of be wary about any guys in the CHL that go high just because their repertoire in the past few years is not with the CHL in the first round. Well,
Adam Kimmelman of NHL.com, this is what he said. Beaudoin is a fantastic athlete with high-end compete who patterns his game after Columbus Blue Jacket forward Boone Jenner. So, I mean, that's a pretty good statement. If the Canes got a guy like Boone Jenner, I think that would be fine.
Yeah, obviously, anytime you can get a guy that'll give you 1,000 NHL games and be a serviceable NHLman, you always hope that's what you get in the first round. Obviously, anything higher than that's going to be a gigantic positive, but especially in the late first round, you're probably not ever going to draft a true superstar unless something messes up and your name is Dallas and you can find guys like Logan Stankoven and Wyatt Johnston in the really late first and early second. But you're always going to try and find a guy that can give you any sum above 500 NHL games and be a serviceable NHLer there. Beaudoin definitely has a good chance to be that, so not the worst option I've ever seen.
Well, when you talk about late round guys, how about Bradley Nadeau? This guy, we got him last year. Again, I think it was 30, and he's a great player.
Complete honesty, I was really, really hoping for Andrew Cristall. That was my big one. It was Cristall, Gavin Brindley, who got drafted to Columbus in the early second, and he made his NHL debut in that same game Nadeau did. Or Jaden Perron, who, funnily enough, ended up becoming a Hurricanes pick anyways, and I think that was just due to his size. But with Bradley, incredible player. His shot is something that I have not seen in a prospect in a while. He's an unbelievable shot. They put him in that one NHL game. They had him in OV spot on that left circle, and they just kept feeding him the puck. I got a chance to actually go watch him in college at Maine during their series against UMass. And he's just an incredible player, incredibly cerebral. His playmaking with the puck on his stick and off his stick grew a ton in his freshman year at the University of Maine. He finally developed a passing ability, which is not to say he didn't have it before, but it finally showed up a little bit more. And I got to talk to him and a lot of his family and his brother Josh, who I do hope the Hurricanes sign. And I hope Josh is at prospect camp in July.
Well. Yeah,
I hope he signs eventually. I hope he makes it a development camp. But with Nadeau, he's just an incredibly nice guy. He's from, I don't want to say middle of nowhere, Canada, but his family was telling me it's a town of 500 people. They have to travel an hour, 2 hours to go to practices, go to games. They're incredibly humble and they understand what to do and the hard work it requires to get to where they are. And I do think, I know it's kind of early to talk about, but I do think Bradley Nadeau makes the team out of camp next year. I think it's hard to keep that shot and his overall ability out of the NHL, especially with how much attrition is coming to the roster. I think having that forward at $925,000 is way too invaluable to have.
Yeah, I agree. And, you think about, we got Seth Jarvis coming along. You get a Bradley Nadeau in there. You've got some great young players to really kind of build this team over the years. I'm a big Bradley Nadeau fan as well. I watched all the action, some of the action in the NCAA at the end of the year, and he looked fabulous. Quick point on Jaden Perron. You mentioned Jaden Perron, and one of the things that we see with the Hurricanes is their ability to pick up players that are highly regarded, well down in the draft. I mentioned that with the Russian players, but they do it with some others as well. We could talk about the past when they got, Jacob Slavin and Brett Pesce, and even Alexander Nikishin was a third rounder. So they've been able to do very, very well. But Perron is interesting. Perron, you look at some of the ratings on Perron. Dauber Prospects had him at 12, McKean's at 34. Some of these guys had him pretty high. We got him at 94. Yeah.
Yeah. With terms of that, I think the biggest thing NHL teams still value is size. Yeah. And unfortunately for Jaden Perron, he's one of those short kings that, and especially if you doubt a short man's skating ability, anybody under 5'9", if you doubt their skating ability, it's really tough to project them to the NHL eventually. The great thing about Perron is that his skating was already good in the USHL in his draft year, and during his freshman year at the University of North Dakota, it got better. Yes. And as long as his offensive playmaking can translate next year, even though he scored a lot of goals, a lot more than his assists, I think he's got something. I really do like Perron. And with a lot of teams kind of passing on him, I think the big thing there is just teams value size. And a lot of the times they'll take these guys that are bigger and they'll try and mold them into what they want, instead of just taking the smaller guy who probably has a higher upside down the line, but he's a boomer bust prospect, so you got to hope he booms.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm a fan of Perron as well. I think, he's had a great program in North Dakota. Of course, that's where Jackson Blake came out of. So I think that's going to help him a lot. And a couple more years there, and then we'll see what he can do. But he's definitely a guy with high skill. Speaking of centers, I wanted to check one other center in some detail, and that's Sacha Boisvert. Sacha Boisvert, he's a guy, again, he's good size. He's over 6 feet. He's close to 200 pounds. He's a guy that actually he's a little bit thinner, but he's a guy that definitely is going to bring a lot of skill to the table. He was drafted twice in Quebec, but decided to come to the U.S. under-18 program. And that's kind of exciting news. And I think he's a guy that is probably going to go higher in the draft. Elite Prospects had him at 21, McKean's at 28, so he's right where we are. Flow Hockey had him at 22, and Pronman at 23. If he could slip to 27, I think he might be a real nice addition. What do you think about Sacha Boisvert?
Yeah, like I was just talking about with that USHL, the Canes have decided to look harder at that in a lot recent years. Perron, Blake, Michael Emerson was another later round guy that ended up getting taken. They like USHL. They're starting to turn around on it. It's becoming a better league overall. They're getting a lot more talent than they used to, so it's becoming a lot better of a league. Boisvert is somebody that has an incredible shot. I wouldn't say it's anything close to what Nadeau had in his younger year, but he has an incredible shot. His passing ability, even though it's kind of rush-based and he likes to move a lot in transition, it's good. Again, the whole 200-foot package might be a little bit of a question mark, but I never expect young guys to come out of the gate and just be that full 200-foot player, because that is so incredibly rare nowadays. He's a very good prospect. I like his size. His age is very solid. He likes to throw the body around, and anytime you get a guy that's 6'2" that understands how to use his body, that is more advanced for his age, always a good thing, because you need to have people like that. And especially now that I see that he's going to end up at the University of North Dakota.
Yes.
That USHL and North Dakota line, there's another guy really late on in the draft that I think might have a chance to get drafted by the Canes that's taking that same development path. But anytime they like it, they really like to stick with certain things, and they'll always try and find one. Kind of like how Ron Francis always had one person that he had to take. You know he was taking. It was like his staple. It didn't really matter if it happened until the later round. They have their thing, and as of right now, it's just USHL to college with those three, and I think Boisvert would be obviously a very good ad.
Yeah, and when I saw he's going to North Dakota, I kind of felt the same thing. Corey Pronman's a big proponent of Boisvert. He said he's well liked in the league as a good-sized center who can skate, score, and make plays, and I expect him to be a mid-first. So that's pretty high regard from Prodman, who usually is pretty close to the mark. So, yeah, if we could get Boisvert, I think that'd be a great day for the Hurricanes for sure. Okay, let's move on. So the Canes' defensive situation, again, looking at that, down the line, the Canes do have some prospects. I mentioned a couple of Swedes a minute ago, Forsmark and Nystrom. And, of course, they've got Grudinin and a few other players floating around. I think this is an opportunity for them to pick up a heck of a player. And I was going to talk a little bit about Charlie Elick. So Charlie Elick, to me, he would be kind of interesting. This is a big guy. He's 6'3". He's over 200 pounds. He's rock solid defensively. He's a great skater for a big man. He's rated again all over the map. Elite Prospects had him at 26. McKean's at 45. Chris Peters of Flow Hockey had him at 24. And Corey Prodman of The Athletic had him at 32. What would you see if we had a defensive pairing of a Charlie Elick and Alexander Nikishin? What do you think about Elick?
Well, if you ever have a pair of Nikishin Elick, I'd be terrified if I was an opposing forward because that's 6'4" and 6'3" trying to hit you real hard. That would not be a fun time. I really do like Charlie Elick. He was one of those guys I covered a lot more in depth, and I really do believe in the potential of his defense. He was put into a shutdown role for the Brandon Wheat Kings. He was put into a shutdown role for Canada during the U18s.
Yes.
He was put into these big shutdown roles, and he would continuously provide very good results. Obviously, being 6'3" and a righty, he's going to be somewhat valuable to anybody. I don't think there's any chance he goes later than 40 because, again, big body, right-handed defenseman, you're going to make a lot of money. It's just one of those things that always seems to happen. I think there is genuine concern, though, about his offense. There's flashes of his playmaking ability trying to transition the puck from his own zone and out. The issue is that playmaking has been sporadic, and even when he's using it a lot more, it's kind of shaky. It doesn't connect all the time. It might lead to a turnover. I compared him to guys like Caden Gooley for Montreal and Braden Schneider from New York. Okay. I love both those players, and I do think Elick can get there. I just do have genuine concern about his offense that would warrant him or warrant some drawback if he gets to your pick and he's on the board.
Well, he would pair nicely with an offensive-minded defenseman and somebody that can move the puck quickly. And certainly there are those that are available that could also be considerations in the future. I agree with you. I do say this, in some of the highlights I've seen of Charlie Elick, he seems to have a pretty good shot. He seems to get it on net and creates opportunities. So I think that's a good part of his game as well.
Yeah, his shot gets through a lot more than normal, but I think that's just a proponent of being 6'3" and having decent lateral movement skating wise. You can kind of just move and make your own space and get a shot off. I do like his shot though. His shot's a lot better than his passing ability, which says something. So.
Yeah, so I think, again, if we look at what people are saying about him, I think clearly he's a guy that, physical defender who takes care of his own end especially well. Skating ability is a standout trait, which is why I think he can potentially be a top 4 shutdown defenseman in the league. That's Chris Peters of Flow Hockey. He usually knows what he's talking about. Scott Wheeler of The Athletic said this: led by standout physical attributes and excellent skating both forward and backward, Elick is a steady, engaged defender with real defensive upside and a developing offensive game. So Wheeler thinks he's making progress on the offensive side as well. So high praise for Charlie Elick.
Yeah, I think Elick can get there offensively. It's just a matter of, can he? I think he could, and his offensive game can be very serviceable and translatable, especially to the NHL. It is just a matter of, can he get there?
Well, something interesting about Charlie Elick, McKean's does this skills analysis, and they have a top 10 and a number of different skills. And with Charlie Elick, he was in the top 10 of best defensive defender and best body checker, most physical. So that's high praise for Elick.
Yeah, and that came through on my viewings of him. I watched him with the Canada U18s. I watched him a lot with Brandon. His defensive game, he can read a play very well. He's a lot more of a proactive defenseman than maybe a reactive, even though his reactions are very good. Obviously, being 6'3", his stick is going to be a little bit longer, which makes it a little bit easier to break up plays. And one of his favorite things is if a player is trying to take a run at him and try and go around him, he just doesn't let it happen. He kind of just throws himself and throws his body weight at the player in a manner to just break the seal of the stick to the puck and the player in the puck. And most of the time it works out, so can't complain.
Yeah, that sounds good. And I talked about those top 10 skills with McKean's. The next defenseman we're going to talk about was in there as well under best overall skater and best offensive defender, and that's Alfons Freij. Alfons Freij rated, again, kind of a little bit lower in some cases than where the Canes will be at 27, but this guy's a pretty interesting prospect. Elite Prospects had him at 37, Craig Button at 31, McKean's had him at 19, but Corey Pronman had him at 60. What do you know about Alfons Freij?
Alfons Freij is an incredible puck mover. He is very, very talented with it. He knows the amount of touch that it needs to go to a certain player. If it needs to go hard, fast, needs to be a saucer, needs to be slower. He just understands the timing of everything with the puck on his stick, especially in the offensive zone. His skating is incredibly good. Elite Prospects raves about his mechanics in terms of skating. Defensively, it might be a little bit shaky right now. But then again, for defensemen, you either get one guy who is incredible offensively, who may have a lot of downfalls defensively as of right now. And then in the same regard, you might have a guy that's incredible defensively, but also might have some genuine issues offensively. Alphonse would be one of those defensemen that is incredible offensively. He just understands that half of the game. It's just the other half of the game that might slow him down. I do like him. I like him a lot. In that Corey Pronman mock draft from a few days ago, where unbelievably, I give him all the credit in the world. He did all 7 rounds for every single team.
Yes, he did.
And I couldn't believe it, in complete honesty. I can barely sit through doing a Canes mock draft myself. Because that not that it hurts, but it just takes a while and it uses a lot of your brain power.
Huge amount of work. Yeah.
Yes. And I think Alphonse is very good. I don't know if he'll go in the first round. I know he's rated all over the place, and I know in draft rooms it's going to look a lot weirder because you're going to see some players listed all over the place. With Freij, I think late first. If he doesn't go in the late first, it might be a little while till he does go. But if he's the pick at 60, I would be ecstatic. If he goes, I wouldn't necessarily take him at 27. I think there's going to be a lot better players on the board at 27, but if he falls to 60, I think that'd be a spectacular pick.
Yeah, I agree. Interestingly enough, Jeff Swoboda, who writes for the Columbus Blue Jackets, he did an interesting analysis. He took several of the mock drafts, I think 15 of them, and he kind of crunched them all together. And as it turns out, Alfons Freij is tied at number 27. So that's interesting. When you look at some of the higher numbers and then some of the lower numbers, he ends up at 27 overall. So who knows? Kind of interesting. The other thing about Alfons Freij that I liked is that he does have some size. He's just over 6 feet, but he's almost 200 pounds. So he's not a skimpy defenseman. He's got some size back there. Here's something that Stephen Ellis at Daily Faceoff said. He said, with just some refinement, the 6'1" defenseman could really take the next step in his development. His numbers have been great internationally. He's one of the best offensive defensemen in the Swedish under-20 league. So that's high praise for Freij, and it goes along totally with what you said as well, Nick. So, skilled defenseman. Really like the guy, might be a little bit past 27, might be into that second round, but boy, it'd be great if the Canes could somehow get Alfons Freij. Now, moving on to one other area I wanted to talk about was kind of just forwards. I mean, we've looked at center ice, certainly an area of concern for the Hurricanes prospect-wise. Defense, always looking for defensemen. And then looking at the forwards. And one of the guys that I've really kind of been watching has been Emile Hemming. Now, interestingly enough, in that Jeff Svoboda list, he actually had Hemming at 27 as well, tied with Freij. So it seems like the views of Hemming are all over the map. Again, elite prospects had him at 40, Craig Button at 28, McKean's at 25, and Pronman at 40. This guy, good size. He's got a wicked shot. Can skate. Seems like an interesting player. What do you know about Emile Hemming?
So I'm one of those people that really enjoys playing NHL and doing their franchise modes. And I know last year Hemming was very highly regarded. They thought he was going to be a little bit further ahead than where he is now.
Yes.
I don't know if you follow Lassie Allinen on Twitter. He is the Elite Prospects Finnish scout. He does a lot of tracking of players specifically, like watching their shift by shift. His shot is on something that you don't see a lot. I think his shot is probably the closest to what you would say Nadeau's is. It's just unbelievable. The way the puck comes off his stick and the way he can manipulate where the puck comes off his stick, second to none. It's something that you cannot teach in players. That is something that is given to you at birth. He is incredible. The one thing I worry about is kind of the other parts of his game. Off the puck, can he really make a difference? Defensively, I don't know if it's one of those things where I focus a lot on defense just because I do know that's what the Canes value in a lot of these prospects is having some sort of defensive ability.
Yeah.
So I wonder about if he can make an impact defensively off the puck. But his shot and his skating is going to get him taken highly. He's probably what I would describe as, in this draft anyways, the Finnish Cole Yzerman, where, his shot's good, his skating's good. It's the issues of off the puck, can you make something happen? Now, I will say Hemming played in a lot harder league in my eyes than Yzerman this past year. Yzerman plays in the United States National Team Development Program, which is a very good program. Do not get me wrong.
Right.
I do consider the Liga, the Finnish top league, a lot tougher because at that point you're playing grown men. You're playing grown 20 and 30-year-old men.
Yes.
I think Hemming is going to be a great player. I think if he's there at 27 and like a lot of guys are off the board at that point, you'd look at him. I just don't know if I'd take him at 27. I think he's an incredible player, though.
Well, the interesting thing about Hemming, he's still like 17. He's young, right? So this guy is a younger player coming into the draft. Here's what Mike Morielli of NHL.com said, and I think he's right on. A natural sniper with a good physical presence. Hemming plays a powered forward type game. The 17-year-old right-hand shot is strong on his skates and difficult to contain down low. I think he's a guy you'd really like to have him in your lineup 2 or 3 years from now if he can, grow that defensive side of his game. As you say, guys that can shoot like that and score like that, they're hard to come by. So, I'm kind of hopeful Hemming is the name they call.
I did not realize that Hemming was 17. That's another thing the Hurricanes have made it not known, but they've kind of done in recent years, shown with Nadeau and especially Felix Ungersorum.
Yes.
Is that they will take guys that are younger in their draft year because Felix isn't even 19 yet. He's still 18 years old. That is ridiculous for a guy that is already done with his draft year plus one.
Correct.
He is not even 19 years old when a lot of guys in his class are 19, 20, and 21. And with him being 17, I think that might move me a little bit more just because I know now that he's a little bit younger. Also, from that same team, I'm going to kind of throw out a nice little name. In the later rounds, I've heard some talk about another TPS player, Kasper Pikkarainen, that might be looked at. He's been talked in the same circles as a person that I talk to a lot. He talks to a lot of draft people as well. He's heard Kasper Pikkarainen in the same circles as Jaden Perron, and the Canes valued Perron last year.
Yes.
So I wouldn't be surprised if Kasper Pikkarainen goes. He's another 17-year-old young winger for TPS, that same exact team. He is 6'3", 200 pounds, right winger with a right-handed shot. He's a big physical dude. He likes to use his body weight. His offense is kind of interesting in what I would say. He produced very well for the U20 league, and his passing seems to be a little bit more ahead of his shot. But I just wanted to kind of throw that name out there as a guy that I've kind of heard that might be in contention after the second round.
Cool. Yeah, well, and he would be a nice addition. One thing for sure, the Canes have to get bigger, and a player like that certainly would have a lot of attraction to them, I'm sure. Looking at another forward now, this is a guy I know you like a lot, Nikita Artamonov, again, coming out of Russia. Artamonov, again, he's a guy that looks like he's a real hard worker. He's not that big. He's not, I think he's 5'11", but he's a guy that has a lot of skill. He's playing in the KHL, which is kind of rare. He's a young guy playing in the KHL. I think last year at his age group, he was the number 2 scorer in the league for, I think, 18-year-olds or whatever in the KHL. So he's definitely a guy that's on a good trajectory. Elite Prospects had him at 25. McKean's had him at 50, which is interesting. But Dauber Prospects had him at 23 and Pronman at 33. Seems like it's all over the map, but this guy, he looks like a real player and could be an interesting ad for the Canes. What do you think about this guy?
He's one of the guys I went more in depth on. I really do think Artamonov is going to be that middle 6 forward at the NHL level that is going to make sure you know where he is on the ice, because he's going to be a pest. He's going to hit you when you have the puck. He's going to continuously haunt you when you have the puck. And when he gets the puck, he is a very adept playmaker. If the puck's on his stick, he knows where people are. He understands how to get the puck to them. He doesn't hesitate to shoot either. Elite Prospects had him compared to Michael Bunting, former Cane. And after viewing Artamonov a few times, I do agree. Michael Bunting as a Cane, he bounced off players and he was relentless on the forecheck, and he was a pest after the whistle. And Artamonov seems to be a guy in that exact same caliber. Well, he'll hound you. He'll just go after you. His playmaking is good, and maybe is like a 40 to 45, maybe a 50-point guy at the NHL in that middle 6, third line checking line, second line, maybe a scoring forward. He'd be great. Another guy in Russia that I have taken a look at that seems to have fallen, especially in Corey Pronman's rating. I don't know if it's the Russian factor. I think he talked about it a little bit. Was Igor Chernyshov. He is 18 years old, a lot bigger of a winger. He had him at 27 yesterday going to the Canes because Russian factor, even though I don't believe in it. I think it's kind of dumb to believe in it, but I do know it's a real thing.
Yes.
He would be, if he can somehow hit the 27, Chernyshov would be a pick because he's big. Man. He is an adept scorer. He's a good skater for his size, but Artamonov would be, again, a very good pick. It just kind of is the matter of who is going to be there at 27, and is the Russian factor ever going to play into a thing with these two guys?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. Stephen Ellis of Daily Faceoff said this about Artamonov. He's quickly become one of my favorite wingers due to his high-end hockey IQ and how he gets into scoring position. And certainly the video that I've seen on him shows him exactly that way. So, yeah, he's an interesting one. Again, with the Russians, sometimes they can slip. So it might be that we might end up with a nugget that we haven't really thought would end up at 27 because they're Russians, of course.
Another thing when talking about Artamonov, especially when you were mentioning his IQ, that's another thing that Darren Yorke values incredibly high is players that have a high hockey IQ at a young age. Right. That plays a huge part into how your skills translate to the NHL level, and having that high hockey IQ is something that I do know the Hurricanes value a lot in their draft picks.
Yeah, exactly. And again, I think, with the strong Russian connection that we have, it would be great to add some more, I think, to the mix. And it helps with them, of course, joining the team where there's already countrymen available. So I think that's a real positive for the Hurricanes. And I'd be very happy if his name was called as well. A couple of other guys I wanted to mention just to see what your thoughts were that seem to be talked about around 27 fairly frequently. One of them is Leo Sahlin Wallenius. Of course, big defenseman out of Sweden. You've got Teddy Stiga. He's a smallish center in North America, playing in the under-20 stuff. He looks like he's come a long way in the last year. And also another centerman that's getting a lot of attention, but usually is expected to go higher in the draft, and that's Luchanko. Any of those guys stick out for you, Nick?
I do like Sahlin Wallenius. His ability to move the puck is something that you really like, especially in those left-handed defensemen. His skating is very good, and as for the back 50 feet in his own zone, he's a lot better of a player than you would expect for somebody at his age. So I do like Sahlin Wallenius. At 27, though, I don't know if I'd be the biggest fan of that pick, just because it might be a little high. But if his range, I think early second is going to be his perfect spot, maybe mid-second. So I like that. I do know I have a lot of people that like to talk to me on social media. They really like Teddy Stiga.
Yes.
And it's not that I do not like him. I don't want that to come across as I don't like the player. I don't think he sticks as a center at the NHL level. It's just one of those things that if you're a smaller center, you're going to have to work really, really hard to become a full-fledged center because you have to focus so much more than if you would a winger. With wingers, you can kind of just stay on your side. You don't have to worry about the middle. You don't have to worry about everything defensively, taking faceoffs. And Stiga is an incredible player. I think offensively, he is probably at the high end. He could easily be a 60, 65-point player. The issue is, does he stick as a center at the NHL level? I'm not 100% sure. Defensively, will he ever be something that you can play on a penalty kill or play in like a high leverage situation at the end of a game? I'm not 100% sure, but skill-wise, I think he's great. And I think that's why you see he's so wildly rated all over the board. Bob McKenzie has him at 68, but Elite Prospects has him at 23. Yeah. He is such a volatile player in rankings, and I think that's just because there's a lot of uncertainties in his game. Now, you did mention Luchanko. He's a guy that, in complete honesty, I haven't looked a ton at. Not that I don't think he would be the pick at 27. It's just I don't know if they really like the player. I don't have anything source-wise, so I'm not 100% sure, but I don't know if Luchanko is a guy that they really look at in a higher regard. I think he's more of a maybe not late second, but like mid-second round guy. He's a good player. I'm not entirely wrong. He's a right-handed center. Yeah. His offensive game took a gigantic step, and I like that a lot. I don't know enough about him to talk about him, but with Sahlin Wallenius and Stiga, I don't think they'd be the worst pick at 27, but they wouldn't be high up my boards of guy I would like to see at 27.
Yeah, I think Teddy Stiga, I like him a lot. He's a hardworking guy, very industrious. He's smaller, though, which is something I think the Canes need bigger centers. Sahlin Wallenius, he's another guy that, he's good at everything. He's a great offensive player. He's a great skater. Just a real nice, solid defenseman. But again, there might be better players ahead of him. Luchanko, Corey Prodman really likes Luchanko. He had him at 17. He thinks he's a heck of a player. Now, Luchanko's playing in the OHL, so again, he's playing with Guelph. So maybe that's something the Canes, again, may not be as interested in. But lots of good players. Gosh, we may not even be talking about the player that ends up 27 because as we started, there's just so many options that they could have it's tough to know. But we'll see. Maybe one of the folks we've talked about today is a Hurricane soon. And speaking about that, Nick, cool. I would be delighted if you join me after the draft and talk a little bit about the players the Canes select and let the fans know a little bit more about them and have some fun talking about Canes prospects going forward.
Yeah, that sounds like some I'd be interested in. Just one last thing, because I know I mentioned Casper. Another late-round guy I think the Hurricanes might look at, just because I've done a lot of not unfortunate, but I've done a lot of research into this draft and sunk a lot of time into it. Max Swanson, he's one of the smaller players in the line of Jaden Perron, where he produced at a high level in the USHL. Yeah. He's a little bit smaller, but at that same point, he's going to the University of North Dakota, and he is a very high-end playmaker, and he is a very solid skater, so he might get there. And I would be happy to join again. one of the things that I know I'm going to do is draft night. Obviously, I will talk about the player that does become a Hurricanes draft pick in the first round, and in the later rounds, I will probably have an article talking a little bit more in depth on them sometime after the draft. I can't guarantee right then and there.
Well, later in the year, we'll get a chance to talk about the prospect base. I know you've done a huge amount of work looking at the different positions and helping fans understand better what the depth of the Canes prospect pool is. And also, I'd like to, as we get towards the fall, I'd like to have a conversation of what might happen in Chicago, because a lot of prospects will end up there as well. And I know you've got lots of information about potential players that could end up with Cam Abbott in the Chicago Wolves organization. So, boy, lots to talk about. And of course, we have the draft and then free agency over the next week or so. It's going to be busy for sure right here. But thanks again so much for joining. We'll catch up with you and have a great summer. Thanks a lot, Nick.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
As always, thanks so much for joining. We'd love to hear from you. If you have comments, please put them in down below and we'll respond promptly. And if you like the video, please hit the like button. We'd love to hear what you're thinking about our videos. And again, we're going to be talking a lot about the Hurricanes in the days ahead. Of course, following the draft, Nick Bass and I will get together to talk about the Canes selections. And of course, we've got free agency coming. So lots of things happening in the Canes camp. We're going to keep you totally up to date right here on stormTRacker.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like, subscribe, and tell your friends for everything with the Canes. You need stormTRacker.